Hey everybody, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed, the television edition. Good to have you with me. New and improved, now with 20% more dramatic pauses. That's right, we've listened to you folks. You know, we did some market research recently, sent out some surveys in terms of wanting to find out what viewers and listeners of the show, what they like about the show, what they don't like, what they'd like to see more of, and so forth. We hired this big national firm to handle that for us, and the overwhelmingly what came back was more dramatic pauses. So there you go. We listen to you, the people power. And by the way, the second most, when asked, well, what's the second most important thing you'd like to see more of in the show? People overwhelmingly said nothing. It's perfect the way it is. So I made all that up. But I'm going to go with this more dramatic pauses idea. We didn't really do any kind of market research. I just instinctively feel that that's what you folks want. I'm all about giving you what you want. So welcome to the show. Boy, I'm looking in the monitor and I'm looking shaggy. I probably need a haircut, but you know, I have this thing. A little bit about me. I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. I don't know what it is, but when we get into the summertime, and I know it's not officially summer yet, but of course Memorial Day just passed, and you know, we tend to kind of think of Memorial Day as unofficially the start of summer, even though the official start of summer is almost a month later than Memorial Day. But I tend to want to just kind of let my hair grow when we get into the warm weather, and I tend to be more concerned with keeping it short and neat during the winter, which I know seems counterintuitive. You would think that during the winter when it's cold out, that would be the time that I would want to have more hair, especially someone like me who doesn't like the cold but refuses to wear a hat. I can't wear hats, even on very cold days. I just can't. I find them uncomfortable. So you would think that that's when I would want to let my hair grow. But I've always, I remember when I was a teenager. Of course, when I was a teenager, I had long hair. But I always just, in the summer, I just wanted to let it grow out. And I have to admit, some of the women I know do comment that they seem to like me with the shaggy look for whatever reason. So while I still have enough hair to get away with it, I'll kind of, at least for one more summer, I'll let it grow. Now watch, next week I'll show up and haven't gotten a haircut because, and then all of this will have meant nothing. But because what happens too inevitably is I'll have that one day where I'll get up in the morning and I'll go into the bathroom and I'll look in the mirror and say, okay, now this is just completely out of control. I need to get my hair cut today. And then I'll go and get a haircut that day. But for right now, yeah, I'm just kind of letting it grow out. So anywho, so welcome to the show. Of course, I do want to remind you, because we encourage audience participation, and especially with my dramatic pauses, there's lots of room for you to get in there, you know what I mean? Of course, if you're watching the show live, you can call the number on your screen anytime over the next hour. And if there is no number on your screen, that means you are not watching live, but that's all right. Of course, you can access the show by call or text. Again, only if you're watching live. You can text me during the show at 603-344-6491. There's also Twitter at IPMNation is my Twitter handle. And of course, don't forget the Facebook page for Matt Connarton Unleashed. You'd think I could say my own name. I just get so excited. I'm all ready to come unleashed. I'm like a spring that's already uncoiling. So let me try that again. You can like us on Facebook at Matt Connarton Unleashed, and also to the IPMNation.com Facebook page. I would encourage and even implore you to like that as well. I impel you to like it. Just going to throw out all these verbs. Feeling like throwing verbs today. So, what I use? Implore, impel. I compel. There's another one. I urge you to like the Facebook pages, the various Facebook pages. And of course, if you're watching live too, at IPMNation.com/MCUTV is a live chat room, which I will try to remember to keep an eye on during the show. I don't always remember to do that because I get so unleashed that I lose track of everything else going on around me. That happens a lot. You know, there could be a circus or something, and I wouldn't be paying any attention. I'm focused on, again, I give the people what they want. I'm focused on you. But you can access the chat room, very easy and user-friendly, at ipmnation.com/MCUTV. And at that page also you will find not only when you can see the show live, which is right now if you're watching live, Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, but also the replay times. The show replays several times throughout the week, and you can access the archives because we do archive all the shows there as well. And a programming note, tomorrow if you're watching live, Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the Dr. Kevin Radio Network is the radio edition of Matt Connarton Unleashed. And this week I have a guest whom, if you're watching us on MPTS, some of you folks may be familiar with her. Her name is Brenda Lett, and she is one of the hosts of Inside Story, which, again, if you're watching us on Wednesday live, on Wednesday afternoon, Inside Story immediately follows this program, immediately precedes Norm and Friends. And Brenda is one of the hosts. I say one of because they have several different people who kind of cycle in and out. I think they have 4 different hosts who take turns hosting the show. I've thought about doing that here, but whereas the show is called Matt Connarton Unleashed, the other people who cycle in and out would have to also be Matt Connarton. And there is another Matt Connarton who is in New Hampshire, but he's my uncle, and he's very busy. Although I think it'd be cool to have him come in and host the show and be like, hey, I'm Matt Connarton, because he is Matt Connarton. But anyway, I digress, as I often do. So Brenda's one of the hosts of Inside Story. So she's going to come on the radio edition of this program tomorrow night at 9, and we're going to discuss institutional racism. And I think that'll be a very interesting conversation. We've been wanting to get her on the show for quite a while now, and we're finally going to make it happen. So she will be joining me tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the Dr. Kevin Radio Network. DKRN.net is the easiest domain name that you can use, or you can get there, ipmnation.com/MC Unleashed. That gets you to both the TV and the radio edition, quick and easy. And all the times are there as well, because that show also have lots of replay times. So now that I've bombarded you with all kinds of information, we'll get to some issues, and I'm definitely going to talk about a few different things today. And some of you will be probably happy and relieved to know no death penalty talk this week. Absolutely none. If someone wants to call and discuss the death penalty or text or say something in the chat room, we'll certainly address it. But I'm not going to bring it up this week. I've talked a lot about the death penalty over the last few weeks. This will be a death penalty-free show, even though I always have a lot to say about it, because I loathe the death penalty. And that's it. That's as much as I'll say about that right now. We shall move on. I'm going to talk about a couple quick things, and then I have 2 big topics I want to try to get to. I'm learning, as I mentioned last week on the show, to if I have quick things that I'm only going to spend a few minutes on, I got to front load the show with those, because otherwise, if I open with whatever the big topic or topics are that I want to focus on, I end up rambling about those for the entire hour, and then I never get to anything else. And I do want to include more than one issue in each program. I don't want it to just be one thing, or otherwise it turns into an hour of death penalty talk. You know, and now, too, time is even more important now that I'm throwing in 20% more dramatic pauses. So I got to really be more efficient, economy of language, so to speak. So very quickly, this is something I closed with last week, but I want to readdress it because even though I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, I do need to, I kind of gave it short shrift because I tried to kind of cram this in at the end of the show. I think it was last week, or it might have even been the week before. But this is very significant, and if you just heard me read this quickly, and it's a very short blurb here, but we need to dive into this a little bit because this has implications greater than what was just indicated by Senator Elizabeth Warren from the communist state of Massachusetts. I'm just kidding. I love you, Massachusetts. I do. but I know we have a lot of viewers there who watch us online. But and on CCTV in Cambridge, by the way, Channel 8 in Cambridge, they also carry us, this program. But this was from May 5th. It was a few weeks ago. But this was a significant moment. Elizabeth Warren, the headline is Elizabeth Warren, Obama team chose Wall Street instead of American families. And this was, I grabbed this from Salon.com. So let me read this to you quickly, and then I'll tell you why this is much more significant than it may sound. This was not just a passing comment by Elizabeth Warren. I feel this is big because it gives us a peek of what 2016 may look like in terms of presidential politics. So Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, discussed her relationship with President Barack Obama in an interview on Monday with HuffPost Live, faulting his administration for being too close to big banks, but praising his support for Warren's brainchild, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Warren told HuffPost, quote, "I've made no secret about my disagreements with the administration's policies, particularly as they relate to the largest financial institutions. Like I say in the book, the president chose his economic team, and when there was only so much time and so much money to go around, his economic team chose Wall Street instead of American families who were in trouble," unquote. Now, she also goes on to say, but I also give credit to the president. If President Obama had not been in the White House, we would never have gotten the consumer agency through. He stood up for it, he fought for it, and he made sure that even when those on his own team might have been willing to throw that agency under the bus, that the consumer agency was something that stayed part of the financial reforms and stayed strong, which I supported, by the way, the Consumer Protection Act. So she kind of slams Obama there, you know, and then she goes back and also compliments him on something positive that he did. But the slamming part is really significant. First of all, of course, the observation that she's making is, and this has been a criticism of Obama, of the Obama administration that I think is very quite valid, is that, you know, he put people in charge of the economy. I mean, I think Larry Summers he brought in at the beginning of his administration, and some other folks who a lot of people would criticize as having been influential in terms of policies that help wreck the economy when the economy fell off a cliff at the end of 2007. Or in the last quarter of 2007. I think it was September, really, that it kind of all went to hell very rapidly. You know, and then when Obama came in, he brought in these people like Lawrence Summers, like, what's his name, Timothy Geithner, people who a lot of folks were looking at very suspiciously. You know, these people pushed policies that helped wreck things. The Clinton administration, of course, Larry Summers was involved in the Clinton administration, and a lot of the banking reforms that people, well, the banking policies that people blame for, you know, things like these bad mortgages and whatnot. I forget what there's a specific term for those types of mortgages. I forget what it is now, but a lot of the banking policies that people said played a big role in the housing market crashing and the economy falling off a cliff, they trace to the deregulation of the banking system that happened during the Clinton administration. And that's relevant, and I'll get to that in a moment. But so that is sort of what Elizabeth Warren is referring to here. So, you know, Obama, the hope and change guy, you know, look, let's be really honest here. I know a lot of Democrats, and I used to be a Democrat. I'm now an independent, and one of the reasons I'm an independent is I have a lot of problems with both parties, both Republicans and the Democratic Party. In a lot of ways, they are the same, and one of the ways that they're the same is the bank lobby, the financial sector owns both parties. Absolutely owns both parties. They own our federal government. And Obama's no different. And so if you're an Obama supporter, and you've been toiling under the delusion that, well, this guy is different, hope and change and all of that, there's a reason why, when you look at who got bailouts, who got help in terms of stimulus and whatnot. Well, we bailed out the banks, and we bailed out Wall Street, and we bailed out the auto industry. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't have done those things, but I always say, what about Bill's Hardware down on Main Street, who's struggling just to survive, a small business and a job creator who can't compete with Home Depot and Walmart and whatnot. Where's his bailout? Well, he doesn't get one because he doesn't count in Washington, D.C. He can't afford a lobbyist. So he's not represented. So again, I'm not saying we shouldn't have done those things, but there's a reason why a Democratic president doesn't treat something like that in terms of who we bail out and who gets left out, doesn't treat that any differently than a Republican president would. What's the difference between Obama stimulus and the first wave of stimulus initiated at the end of the Bush administration? Well, it's the same group of people you're bailing out, and the same group of people who got us into trouble, who did things in some instances on a criminal level, who received no punishment and no strings attached in terms of what they're given in terms of bailouts, because they own our government, both parties, okay? There is no separation there. And I think a lot of Obama supporters don't realize, because one of the things I don't like about partisanship, about partisan politics is, and it's one of the reasons why I have to be an independent, is because both Democrats and Republicans tend to, it's part of being an ideologue. Not everyone thinks this way, but most of these folks I talk to who are ideologues, who are polemics, walk around with this idea in their heads that our party, we're the good guys. And it's those other guys on the other side of the aisle who are so dishonest and who don't really have America's best interests at heart, and who have corrupted our government, and who have mortgaged our future economically and all that stuff. And, it's to me, it's kind of silly, that whole mindset of our guys are the good guys. It's those other guys that are wrecking America, because it's simply not true. There are no good guys. Now, I don't mean that literally. Of course, there are good guys in government. I think there are people who genuinely want to do good in both parties. But in the macro, in the grand scheme of things, there are no good guys, and that both parties at the federal level are corrupt and will continue to be so. They've completely sold out to both parties, to the banks, big oil, the pharmaceutical lobby, who else? The auto industry, of course. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't have done those bailouts. Let me just be clear. Particularly with the banks, we saw going into the Great Depression what happens if you let the banks start failing. Now, that's a nightmare scenario. So I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't have done those things, but again, there's a reason why certain people get help with no strings attached, no criminal penalties for the people who did very bad things, and some people get left out in the cold. And I think Elizabeth Warren very succinctly is hitting Obama on this when she makes this comment that the president chose the big banks over American families, because he did. He did that the moment he chose his economic team. No surprise. They bought into his campaign. Wall Street. And by the way, this is something that surprises people. But I'm no expert on this stuff. I'm not an expert on Wall Street. I'm certainly not an economist. I'm not even good at math. But I do know, because from what the reading that I've done, apparently Wall Street historically tends to operate more successfully under Democratic presidents than Republican presidents. And again, some people, that might surprise you. You might think, well, why would that be? Well, we'll come back to that in a moment. I'll tell you why. I think I know. So Elizabeth Warren hits Obama on this, but here's why this is so significant to the 2016 presidential election and the nominating process and how it relates to Hillary, the presumptive Democratic nominee for president. Because, and you might think, well, how could this have any significance? Elizabeth Warren's not running. She's said she's not interested in running. And Obama's not up for re-election. So what does any of this matter? It matters because someone is going to challenge Hillary from the left. Hillary is what probably, we don't really know yet. But if it is her intention to operate anything like Bill Clinton, Hillary is going to be what some refer to as a corporate Democrat, which is what Obama is. Hillary will, let me put it this way. Bill Clinton, a Democrat. I mentioned that these banking reforms that actually, really, they were banking deregulation, a massive deregulation of the big banks during the Clinton administration. That was very conservative economic policy. Bill Clinton was a fiscal conservative, also known to some disparagingly as a corporate Democrat. People who use that term use it as kind of an epithet. Bill Clinton was referred to by former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan in his book as the best Republican president Alan Greenspan ever worked for, meaning that though a Democrat, in terms of fiscal policy, Bill Clinton acted like a Republican. This may be why some Republicans, I know a lot of Republicans who despise and loathe Bill Clinton, probably most of them, but some Republicans who are intellectually honest will acknowledge that Bill Clinton's fiscal and economic policy was actually very conservative and very responsible. We've had Greg Moore from Americans for Prosperity, which is, Greg says it's a bipartisan organization. I think it's really a conservative organization, funded by the Koch brothers. But I'll take Greg out. That's my theory, but I'll take Greg at his word. I like Greg very much. And he's been on both the TV and the radio edition of the show. And Greg is a very intellectually honest guy because he freely acknowledges that Bill Clinton was a fiscally conservative, responsible president, and that it was under George W. Bush, who is a true conservative Republican, in theory, under whom our economic policy, along with our foreign policy, just went completely off the rails, and we went from surpluses back to deficits, and, went into two wars, completely unprepared to fund either of them, and of course got a massive tax cut in a time of war, which is completely irresponsible and fiscally reckless, and left us with a huge mess economically in terms of fiscal policy. So Bill Clinton was a fiscal conservative. Now, depending on your point of view, some would say, I've heard some Republicans say, again, somewhat grudgingly, that Bill Clinton in some ways was a highly effective president. And those who say that tend to say that in regard to his fiscal policy, which was conservative. I was listening to, I don't always catch it, but if I stumble across it, I'll listen because I do enjoy it. Arnie Arneson, she has a show called The Attitude talk show that here in this area you can get. I don't recall what station it's on. When I'm in my car, I'll hit scan if I'm listening to FM radio and just see what I land on because I'm a radio guy and I think it's still fun to do that. Just I like to keep up on what's out there, both in terms of talk radio and in terms of music. But if I land on Arnie's show, I'll listen. And she was talking about what kind of Democrat will Hillary Clinton emerge as? And if she's a Bill Clinton Democrat, she might as well be a Republican. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what she said. Because it was under Bill Clinton's presidency that we had a largely, in effect, a Republican economic policy. So, Bill Clinton's no liberal. He really did not govern like a liberal. He sounds like a liberal. If you listen to any Bill Clinton speech, Actually, as that thought is, as I'm processing this thought in my head, I have to amend it. I was going to say, if you listen to any Bill Clinton speech, he sounds like a liberal. If you listen to a lot of Bill Clinton speeches, he sounds like a liberal, even though he didn't govern as one. I did think of one glaring exception. I forget if it was his first or his second. Might have been his second State of the Union speech during the Clinton presidency. Bill Clinton actually opened the speech with this. He said, "My fellow Americans, the era of big government is over." And by the way, you couldn't even imagine, Barack Obama or really any Democrat saying that today. But that was how Bill Clinton opened the State of the Union address. And I think it might have even been his third State of the Union now that I'm thinking about it. But he was able to say that because that was how he governed. And some would say, well, that's good. He was a Democrat who, instead of being a tax and spend liberal, actually embraced responsible economic policy. And others, like Arnie Arneson, who criticize him for it, would say he was a Democrat who pretended to be for the little guy and to want to fight for American families, but he really was no different than a Republican. So the question is, will Hillary Clinton be a Bill Clinton Democrat, a corporate Democrat, or will she be more to the left of Clinton? And the suspicion is she will be much like Bill Clinton, and also more hawkish on foreign policy, which means that Hillary Clinton, assuming she does run and assuming she does become the Democratic nominee, will quite possibly be a phenomenal general election candidate. She doesn't have to try to necessarily tack to the middle after running left to win the nomination. If she can cruise to the nomination, she'll have an easy time. She doesn't need a lot of running room to get to the middle to win the general election, because we all know the game, right? If you're a Democrat, you got to run left to excite the base and win the nomination, and then run to the middle for the general election. And same thing if you're a Republican, and this has become a problem for Republicans. But if you're a Republican, you have to run to the right to excite the base and win the nomination and win those primaries. And then you have to find a way to get to the middle to not scare the hell out of everybody to win the general election. Like I say, for Republicans, it's a little more of a big swing there ideologically, as we've seen these last couple election cycles, than it is for Democrats. But the basic premise is the same. This is why Elizabeth Warren and her comments are so significant. In a sense, she's not really hitting Obama. She's hitting Hillary. Because, look, there's been some speculation and some buzz about the possibility of Elizabeth Warren running for the nomination and attacking Hillary from the left. Because there certainly is room there, right? You know, Hillary is going to be this almost we're assuming now, we don't know for sure, but almost a conservative Democrat. And so there's going to be a lot of running room for someone to attack from the left, and it may be Elizabeth Warren. Now, Elizabeth Warren has said flatly, I'm not interested in running. And my perception is that she, in fact, will not run, because I think that she probably feels, and this is all conjecture, but she, I think, has a self-awareness to know she's probably not ready. And I think she needs another term in the Senate before she will be ready. I will not be surprised if we see an Elizabeth Warren candidacy for president in the future, but I don't think we're going to see it yet. Might be Martin O'Malley. I can see him running. Someone's going to run to Hillary's left. Don't forget Joe Biden, of course, who we have a very unique situation, and this is one of the things that's so exciting about the 2016 presidential race. You have a sitting vice president who wants to be president, who is in his second term as vice president, who has no chance of winning the Democratic nomination for the presidency, as long as Hillary's in it. Now, if Hillary decides not to run, that leaves room for Biden. And then I think Biden probably will be the presidential nominee. He desperately wants to be president. I mean, you can see it on him. He clearly is a man of ambition and wants to be president. And who knows? Maybe Hillary won't run. I think she will. I feel like the Democrats have already coronated her. But we'll see. But Elizabeth Warren, in this comment, I think she's sort of drawing out the blueprint. There's room to run to the left of Hillary, a lot of room, and here's how you do it. This is how you hit her. And I think this little swipe at Obama is really a swipe at Hillary, and Warren is sort of doing this by proxy for whomever is going to be the one to run to the left of Hillary. Maybe I'm reading way too much into it, but I don't think I am. Now, speaking of Hillary, this will be a bit of a gift for some of my critics who complain that even though I'm an independent and I claim to be a centrist and I claim to have issues with both parties, that I spend an inordinate amount of time criticizing Republicans and not near enough time criticizing the Democrats. And I'm not suggesting that that's not a fair criticism, by the way. I do tend to focus a lot more on criticizing Republicans, but that's because you've got a lot of, shall we say, colorful characters in the modern Republican Party who are very easy to pick on. I mean, the Republican Party is the party of people like Sarah Palin and, Richard Legitimate Rape Murdoch and all kinds of crazy people. And I just don't see that same depth of insanity on the left. But here's something for my Republican friends. And this will infuriate my liberal viewers. I am going to defend someone who I don't take any great joy in defending this person because I've never particularly liked him. But I think he's being unfairly criticized right now. Not that he needs me to stick up for him. He can handle himself. But I think this criticism of him is unfair. And that person is, and this is going to surprise some people. Some of you are going to say, I never thought Matt would be sticking up for this guy. But Karl Rove, I think, has taken a lot of unfair criticism over the past couple of weeks. Karl Rove has been questioning, for those of you who've been in a cave, he's been openly questioning or asking questions about Hillary Clinton's health and an incident where she had to be hospitalized. She hit her head or something, and there's questions about, Rove has been raising these questions about maybe she, if she had a concussion, there's just things that we need to question about her health and her age. Hillary Clinton will be pushing 70 by the time it's time to inaugurate her, if she does in fact win the presidency. If she serves 2 terms, she'll be 77 at the end of her second term. I don't know if she'll be, she'll be 69, I think he said, either at inauguration time or when the election is held. I see absolutely nothing wrong with raising these questions, and the way the left has gone wild over this, I understand it. It's just partisan politics. But a thing that is frustrating to me, that if you're a regular viewer, or if you listen to the other show, and again, it's one of the reasons why I cannot attach myself to either party, is the way both sides take every little thing they can wildly out of context. And now we're seeing both sides do it. Does one side maybe do it a little more vociferously than the other? Yeah, I kind of think so. But both sides are pretty shameless about it. And the left, the way they've been nailing Karl Rove on this, I think is unfair, and I think they're taking it out of context. They're putting words in his mouth. They're talking about, Karl Rove is going around claiming Hillary has brain damage, so she can't be president and whatnot. And that's not what he said. But he has been raising questions about her health and about her age. And those are perfectly reasonable things to raise when talking about who is going to be the next leader of the free world. There's nothing wrong with asking these questions. And by the way, I never heard Karl Rove say, well, Hillary Clinton has brain damage, so she can't be president, or Hillary Clinton's too old and she can't be president. I never heard him say that. I've just heard him raise these questions and saying these are questions worth asking, which they are. He's right. And there's nothing wrong with asking these questions when you're picking a president. And it is so hypocritical for the left in this country to criticize anyone for asking these questions when, in fact, I still remember, okay? I mean, I was a kid at the time, but I remember the presidency of Ronald Reagan and how the left would ask all these questions about, is Reagan slipping? Is his age catching up to him? There's rumors about Alzheimer's. During the debates, when he was up for re-election in '84, this is not the Reagan of 1980. Maybe it's time. He's just too old. He's not himself anymore. These questions were raised, and I got annoyed last night. I was watching MSNBC, and I really like MSNBC. I again, as an independent who takes different positions on different issues ideologically, I try to expose myself to a variety of different viewpoints, and so I'll watch MSNBC, I'll watch Fox, or at least as much as I can tolerate. I'll listen to different kinds of radio in the car, but I like MSNBC, and I was watching Hardball with Chris Matthews, and you might almost be able to tell from the way I present things that I'm a big fan and have been for a couple of decades now, actually, of Chris Matthews. I really like Chris Matthews. Now, I don't always agree with him because he, even though he says he's not as liberal as everyone thinks he is, on MSNBC, he really toes the liberal line because MSNBC is the liberal counterpart, of course, to Fox, which is the fair and balanced conservative network. Last night I found myself not only disagreeing with him, but actually getting kind of annoyed because he opened with discussion of Karl Rove and the criticism that he's been taking and some of the things that he said. And he had on with him Howard Feynman, who I like very much, and another a journalist who's I forget her name. She's not someone I've seen on there very much. Is it Malika Fredrickson, maybe? I can picture her, but I forget her name. It's someone I wasn't particularly familiar with. But the three of them are sitting there, and they're making it all about, this is because Hillary's a woman. It's all because she's a woman. If she were a man, no one would be asking questions about her age and about her health. That's where they were directing all of this. And I ended up shutting it off. I was like, I can't listen to this because it really frustrates me that we live in an era where you can't say anything without someone assigning some sort of motive to it that is not apparent in any of the actual context in the dialogue, in the words that you use with which to express whatever it is you're expressing. Karl Rove said nothing. He has said nothing in his comments that to me sounded even the slightest bit sexist or chauvinistic or misogynist or anything. But there they are. There's Chris Matthews and his cohorts on MSNBC making it all about, this is just because Hillary is a woman. That's why they get away with this stuff. And by the way, I don't think Karl Rove is even really getting away with it because people on the right have even been criticizing him. He's taking flack from his own side. Newt Gingrich came out and slammed him for what he'd been saying. Although Newt Gingrich, interestingly, I know this because I've heard him come right out and say it, that even though he disagrees with Hillary ideologically on probably everything, he respects her as a professional, and he really admired the way she carried herself when she was a senator. Newt Gingrich has said this. It's on record. I'm not, making this up. So I think that I almost got the impression from his comments that he was kind of sticking up for her, not because I'm sure he doesn't like her or anything, but just out of respect, he felt compelled to kind of stick up for her a little bit because he does respect her as a professional, to use his exact words. So he's taken flack from his own side. But I don't see anything sexist about this. And it's also this idea that not only is it disingenuous to criticize him when people raise the same questions about Reagan, but I remember 2008 people raising these questions about McCain. John McCain, if I remember correctly, he would have been even older than Reagan when inaugurated if he had been elected president. People had questions about McCain, about his mental acuity, his physical health. I think people were especially concerned in that case because if McCain had been elected and then something happened to him, we would have had President Palin. And yikes. So, no, she's, anyone who's heard me discuss Sarah Palin, you already know my thoughts on her. And by the way, there's probably somebody out there watching who thinks I just pick on Sarah Palin because she's a woman. And no, I pick on Sarah Palin because she's, I think quite literally, one of the dumbest, least articulate people I've seen ever emerge on the national stage the way she did. That's just how I see it. So assigning this idea that there's some sort of gender bias to Rove's comments, I think are ridiculous. Part of why I'm so bothered by that, aside from the fact that it's intellectually dishonest, is I'm a big believer in the idea that you should keep your powder dry. In other words, things like sexism, and bias against women in politics and in other aspects of life too. That's a real thing. See, I would never suggest that that's not real. Just like racism. That's still very much a real thing in this country. Okay? And all kinds of other isms, right? But you got to keep your powder dry for instances of actual practical application of these isms. Because if you call sexism on every little thing, even when it's probably not actual sexism, and I would apply the same standard to racism, which I talked about a couple weeks ago on the show. If you call that for every little thing, it begins to seem like you're crying wolf, and then when an actual instance of whatever that ism is that you focus on comes up, no one believes you because you didn't keep your powder dry. You know what I mean? So I would say to the left, if you're going to start trying to make it look like, well, Rove is just attacking Hillary because she's a woman, or this is part of the Republican war on women, save it. Save it for an actual instance of it. Because there's nothing Rove said that sounds like any of that to me. And I don't think Rove's a smart guy. Again, I don't like him. I take no joy in defending him. I think the way he ran the Bush campaign in 2000, when they were fending off the challenge of John McCain for the Republican nomination in 2000, some of what they did to McCain to undermine him, particularly South Carolina, some of the smearing they did was so underhanded and so just plain evil that I don't think I can ever forgive Karl Rove for what he did. and the way he ran that campaign. It was as dirty as it gets. And a guy like McCain did not deserve to be treated the way he was. And I would have much rather had seen John McCain win the Republican nomination. The John McCain of 2000, I actually liked much better than John McCain of 2008. But I don't think there's anything wrong with Rove asking questions about Hillary's health and Hillary's age. And then it's up to the voters to decide, are they concerned about these matters or not? It's up to Hillary as a candidate to decide how much she wants to divulge about her health. And if she wants to put it all out there and release her medical records, great. If she doesn't want to divulge anything and say it's none of your business, fine. It's then up to the voters to decide, do they accept that or do they reject that when they go to vote for her or against her? There's nothing wrong with raising these questions. And here's the other thing the other reason why I think the left is being disingenuous here. Karl Rove was making these comments, raising these issues on Fox News. Karl Rove is a Fox News contributor. He's an analyst for Fox, a political analyst. So to get mad at Rove for talking to the Fox News audience about Hillary in a way that some perceive as disparaging, it's, he's preaching to his own choir. What do you care? He's talking to an audience that already doesn't like Hillary and already thinks she's Satan. So why would it even matter? Why would those comments even matter? Which is probably what Rove was thinking when he said them, because again, he's a smart guy. He's kind of the evil genius, if you will. I don't think he does anything without thinking that it's going to benefit the Republicans in some way. So, again, I had to turn it off last night. They're making it all about he's attacking Hillary because she's a woman. He's attacking Hillary because she's probably going to be the Democratic nominee for president. That's why he's attacking her. And I don't see anything out of line there. Let's see. I want to address the VA situation. The Veterans Administration, of course, has been under attack. There's been calls for a criminal investigation now, so this goes deeper than just the VA being sort of systematically inaccurate to handle the workload, the caseload of all these veterans. I have a couple things I could read to you, but we don't have a lot of time left in the show, so I'm just going to kind of throw out my thoughts here quickly. I have some thoughts on this. First of all, I call BS on any kind of partisan arguing and bickering over this. For example, there are now Republicans attacking Obama for the debacle with the Veterans Administration, blaming him. I will accept this much criticism of Obama. Obama pointedly said during the campaign back in 2007, 2008, said that when he would, as president, he would make sure that things got cleaned up at the VA. And he expressed a lot of, he talked the talk and expressed a lot of concern over that. And then he put Shinseki in to handle that. And of course, there still are enormous problems at the VA, well into Obama's second term. And Obama himself was really kind of late to the party. This current VA scandal, I think it was 4 weeks before Obama bothered to come out and address it publicly at a podium. That's unacceptable. As commander-in-chief, he should have been out in front of this, not in back of it. So some of the criticism of him is valid. However, the right, of course, A lot of them are going overboard with it and trying to blame the whole state of the VA on the Obama presidency. And that's disingenuous, because for as long as I can remember, since I was a kid, I can remember people complaining about the VA. And I remember from when I was a kid, I remember hearing about how this was a problem in our country. Veterans coming home from war and not getting the help that they need. And the reality is this, my friends. This country has a long history. You can go all the way back to World War I, and there was an instance where veterans actually did kind of a march on Washington in protest of the fact that they were promised certain things as veterans by the government, and the government was not fulfilling their obligations to these veterans. So they had to do this mass protest in Washington. World War I. And that pattern has continued since then. I'm going to be very, very blunt here. And some people aren't going to like what I say, and some people are going to take this out of context. They're going to misunderstand what I say. This will sound to some unpatriotic, and I don't mean it that way at all, because I love my country, which is part of why it infuriates me the way we so poorly treat our veterans. I do. I love my country, but I can't help but feel embarrassed and ashamed of my country when I look at the way this country has a long history of talking the talk, of talking about how it's so important to revere our veterans and to appreciate our veterans and to love our veterans. And we send these people off to fight for our country and to fight for our freedom. And that's why it's so important to take care of them. And we have these ceremonies, and we even have holidays like Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and, tell a veteran today, thank you for your service. All this great feel-good talk, right? But then what happens? This country has a history of we talk the talk, but then we do everything we can to spit in their faces when they come home by not doing anywhere near enough to help them. I can't believe that the phrase homeless veteran is even a part of the American vernacular, but it is. I can't even believe that there are places like here in Manchester, we have the Liberty House. Why places that have to depend on donations and charity and trying to scrape by on whatever they can get from the government just to stay open to take care of homeless veterans. This country doesn't care about our veterans. We never have. And I'm embarrassed and ashamed of the way we talk all this feel-good stuff about appreciating our veterans, and then they're left with this huge backlog. They come home from war and they need help, and they got to wait, in some cases, years to get any help from the agency that is supposed to be there to help these people. And then every once in a while, a scandal, like the current scandal, will come up. Oh, and everybody's so outraged. Oh, how can we let our veterans down like this? And what will the status of this be a year from now? Will anything have changed? Will anything have improved? No. Everyone will have forgotten about it until the next big VA scandal comes up. What happened after the Walter Reed scandal during the Bush administration? Oh, everybody was so upset. How can we treat our veterans this way? And then after a while, it was kind of forgotten about. It's embarrassing. I have these dual things going on inside of me right now. Like most people, we're human beings, we're complex. We can have mixed feelings about things. We can have ambivalence. And I have these mixed feelings about my country right now that are very, very uncomfortable. Because on the one hand, I love my country so much, and I believe in America. I really do, in some very deep and fundamental ways. I'm a very patriotic person. I believe, this is the land of opportunity and all that stuff. I love this country so much. I really do. And yet at the same time, there's this other side of me. It's hard to even say it. It's hard to even force the words out of my mouth because I hate the way it sounds and I hate the way it feels. But there's this part of me, when I look at the fact that going all the way back, really, if you do the research, going all the way back to the beginning of the United States, this country has a history of sending people off to war to fight for our freedom, and then doing everything we can to screw them over when they come home. And that part of me that sees that is ashamed and embarrassed by my country. Maybe some of you feel the same way. Maybe some of you think that I just said something horribly un-American and unpatriotic and that I must be some secret communist. But I love our veterans. And I'm just embarrassed that this is even an issue. It's horrifying. I've always said, and I'll close with this, I've been very open about it. I've said it on this show. Not on my best day do I have the nerve to strap on a weapon and run into a place where people are actively trying to kill me. So, for anybody who does have the courage and the ability to do that, I have an infinite amount of respect for you. And when you come home from doing that for us, you should get whatever you need from us. That's going to do it. Don't forget, tomorrow night, the radio edition of Matt Connarton Unleashed, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Dr. Kevin Radio Network. And my guest will be Brenda Lett from Inside Story. We'll be talking about institutional racism, so looking forward to that. I think that'll be a great discussion. And if you're watching us live on Wednesday, of course, you know the drill. I'll be back at 4 o'clock with Norm and at 6 o'clock with Gary, and I'll talk at y'all later. Thanks, everybody.